It is an absolutely terrible. I've been talking to a few residents and to the amazing volunteers and staff here at this community centre, and it is an absolute disaster. And I've heard some feedback. There are some things I want to go away and make some progress on behalf of residents, but it is heartbreaking.
What is there specifically that you've heard from people who've been affected by this?
Well, there's all manner of things, but essentially what I want to do is later this morning have a chat with the Chief Executive of Kensington and Chelsea Council and just chat through some of the specific feedback, but I'd rather not talk about the individual things that people have said to me. I think that's...
You've come here this morning, you've spoken to residents. Why hasn't the Prime Minister come and done that?
The Prime Minister came yesterday to look at the operation, to try and make sure that everything that's being done by government that can be done is done.
Why didn't she speak to any residents, though, people affected by this? Do you think she lacks humanity, which is what's been said about her?
No, the Prime Minister is absolutely heartbroken. I mean, I'm here as Leader of the Commons on behalf of the Commons. We had an emergency briefing yesterday from the ministers responsible, and the whole sense in the House of Commons is absolute horror and shock. And I don't really think it's appropriate to be talking about whether people have humanity or not. This is...
But will the Prime Minister come down and speak to residents and people affected, the victims? There's a lot of anger here, you must see that.
I think, understandably, people are desperately traumatised, and yes, people are angry, and that's totally understandable. And what we need to do is to get a grip of this and make sure that we're meeting their immediate needs as well as their ongoing needs, and that's really the priority for government.
You've said you're going to do an inquiry, but what else can you do? What reassurances can you give people, for example, that they will get the homes that you've promised them? What can be done? You haven't got a government yet.
Well, very specifically, we're taking it day by day. I mean, people at the moment, they need things like to get access to their bank accounts. They need overnight accommodation. People need clothing and emergency supplies. There is a sequence. And of course, as the government has made clear, in bringing out Bellwyn, which basically means that money can be provided to deal with emergency matters as well as with ongoing matters. People need counselling. There's this absolute devastation about not knowing who has been affected and so on. I mean, there's any number of immediate pressing issues, but in the longer term, it's absolutely clear, the government's made it absolutely clear that people's housing needs longer term will of course be met, and that's completely clear.
But when will the Prime Minister, though? Because we've seen that the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, come down, we've seen him hugging residents and victims. We haven't seen any of that from any of your party.
Well, as I say, we had an emergency briefing for all members of the House of Commons.
But are there plans for the Prime Minister to come down and speak to residents, actually directly, and hear their stories?
The Prime Minister has been incredibly closely following exactly what's happening. She is trying to get the government to roll into action as fast as possible to deal with the immediate issues. She was here yesterday.
We need a government first for that, though, don't you? I mean, we've got a long way to go to we're in that position.
That will be next week. The Queen's speech is on Wednesday. Announced yesterday, and it's absolutely clear that we need to do everything we can to deal with the immediate problems now, and ongoing, as the Prime Minister has said, there will be a public inquiry. We will get to the bottom of this. People are angry, they will need answers, there'll need to be some closure on this, but at the moment it's incredibly raw and incredibly of the moment, and we just need to make sure that we're meeting all of the immediate needs of people who've been affected.
Do you agree you could have handled this better?
I think this is an absolute tragedy, and there's always things that we all wish I'd said this or done that, but in reality, as I said, every single member of the House of Commons, every member of the government from the Prime Minister downwards are absolutely horrified by what's happened, and we're all trying to do the best we can.
You still haven't answered the question, will the Prime Minister be coming here to speak to residents and victims directly?
The Prime Minister is doing everything she can. I'm sure if it's felt that will be helpful, then she will do that. But at the same time, there are some very practical needs that must be met here for residents who've been affected and for their families.
So is that not a priority then for the Prime Minister to come and speak to people directly? I think that would give people a lot of reassurance. You must meet the victims who are here and behind you. Yep. Yeah. What would you like to say?
Well, at least you could have met the victims, at least. Corbyn was a good man, and he met them. He came and met the people. He didn't come with a bunch of police, and no one saw her.
What would you say to that, Ms Leadsom?
You know, as I say, I've come here today because I wanted to meet residents. I wanted to share the absolute sorrow and horror of everyone in the House of Commons, from the Prime Minister down.
He's asking why no one else come here. Why not the Prime Minister or other people from your party?
Well, I know there've been a number of visits. I'm not entirely sure, but I know that various ministers have been here, and I think a number have tried to come here more privately to try and talk to residents and to try and give practical support, and that I'm sure will continue.
You can. Yeah, there's a question. Why privately?
Basically,
Can I say one thing?
yes.
Why has Sadiq Khan, Corbyn have come down here, not with all the stunt of bodyguards and police? They've come down here and spoke to people and actually down to level. Why is Theresa May coming here with a load of police, walking around, not meeting no one, not meeting a family? Who is now at the Westway Centre? There's victims there. Is there anyone from your party there?
You've come down here. Were you sent here, or have you decided to come here on your own?
I've come here as Leader of the House of Commons to represent the House of Commons, which is for all members of Parliament. This emergency briefing we had yesterday, you could absolutely feel the sympathy and the horror and the real sense of tragedy, and I think MPs from the government down to the newest backbenchers are just desperately wanting to help residents here. So I've come myself today to try and understand if there's any practical support that I can give in trying to move things on to deal with the immediate problems.
You're hearing here, this man here said it's not enough. Women here saying that these private meetings are no good. There's a lot of anger. What's being done to reassure people?
Well, I've had some discussions with residents today, and I've heard a number of specific pieces of feedback about individual cases and more general points which I want to take away and go and make some action on.
You must sense the anger. You must sense the anger.
I absolutely do, and I totally understand it. I mean, it is devastating, absolutely devastating, and of course I do sense the anger, and I'm completely sympathetic. I utterly understand how appalling this is.
You know, right, that this could have been stopped. You know that, right? You know, this fire could have been stopped long time ago, because this block and every single other block in this area is suffering the same way, suffering the exact same way. There is basic stuff. There's not even sprinklers in there. That could have cost £200,000 just to do that. They had £10 million to spend. They spent 8.6 million. Where is the rest of the money?
I mean, you know, as the Prime Minister has said, there will be a full public inquiry. As we discussed yesterday, it's also vital that we look at what can be done in the very early short-term period to look at if there are things that need to be checked. I know in Northamptonshire, for example, my own chief fire officer is going to check every high-rise building in terms of fire safety. There's a lot of fire officers around the country looking again to make sure that this couldn't happen again, but it doesn't help Grenfell Tower.
Will there be money? Well, you've touched on something very important here. Will there be money made available for sprinklers?
You know, the ministers are looking very carefully at all of the implications, whether there are quick wins that can be done, and in which case they will be done, and of course the longer term policies. But in the very short term, I know, as I say, that there are fire officers all around the country looking very closely to make sure that nothing like this could happen again in the short term.
Why do you think the public inquiry is going to help anything? I mean, there's a public inquiry after Lakenall, and they took place 4 years ago, and a lot of these issues came out then. Nothing was acted upon. The recommendations from Coroner Kirkham. Why should anyone be confident that another inquiry will stop this ever happening again?
You know, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, people will want answers. People will want to understand what happened, what can be done, and it's absolutely vital that we get to the bottom of it. I don't think, I mean, it's always difficult, of course it is, but you know, we do need to know exactly what happened. A lot of people have lost their lives. There's really grieving and traumatised relatives. They want to know what happened.
People want answers now, not in 2 months, not in 3 months, not in a year's time. 2009.
I do understand.
The last block was on fire. What has changed since then? Nothing. I'll tell you one more thing that I don't know if everyone knows. The other tower in Westbourne Grove in April had 2 sets of stores. I've got friends living in there, and it was set on fire. What happened then? We said, oh, they're going to look at it. They're going to sort it out. Nothing's been done. We've been hearing the same thing. Now it's enough. Enough is enough. I've got friends in that tower. I have a right to be angry. I've got friends in there. Because of people saving money, people are dying.
Yeah, well, you know, that's why it will be so important to get to the bottom of what happened.
That's going to take too long, though, isn't it, Miss Leadsom? It's just going to take far too long for people here. We're on the verge of some serious anger in the streets.
Yeah. No, I absolutely understand it. I can see it, and I'm deeply, deeply sorry on behalf of all of my colleagues in the House of Commons, sending our greatest sympathy. And as I say, I want to go and take some actions, make some progress on anything that I can today.
And you've been here for over an hour, and you've made the effort. When will we see the Prime Minister do the same?
You know, I'm absolutely sure.
Has this affected her leadership?
No, the Prime Minister is trying to get a grip on this and to provide that practical
Would you have done a better job as leader?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Excuse me.
Well, in fairness to Andrea Leadsom, the leader of the Commons, they're not running from the cameras and in fact taking some fairly heated questions from local residents for a good 10 minutes or so there. Many of them incredibly angry, not least because of the handling of the whole situation by the Prime Minister yesterday, where she was seen to be inhuman, lacking in humanity, if you will. So very difficult questions for her, and also about the amount of money that could have been spent on something so cheap as sprinklers when a multi-million-pound refurbishment was done on the Grenfell Tower behind me. Of course, Andrea Leadsom, they're working to, I guess, damage limitations after Theresa May yesterday really just handled the whole situation so badly. A new line that I just want to bring